Hello, everybody. Welcome to News Time. Here's where we discuss issues that have larger socio-political consequences. Today, I want to talk to you about this particular case that came to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court today has refrained from sentencing a man who was convicted under POCSO. POCSO is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences. This is an act that came into picture in 2012, and this is the ground act that defines the way to deal with sexual crimes against children. Also, it's a law that enhances the reporting of sexual crimes against children, which is also very important. Talking about the specific case that came to Supreme Court today, the Supreme Court today refrained from sentencing this man who was convicted under POCSO. As a 24-year-old, he had sex with a 15-year-old, but he went on to marry that girl, and the couple now have a child together. They live together. The court went on to say that the girl, the victim here, had undergone a lot of trauma. In fact, the legal and social consequences that followed this act of crime had taken a toll on her, and that it was the society and the legal system that had failed her. Now, the court, in fact, invoked Article 142 of the Indian Constitution that grants it the authority to impart full justice. In fact, remember that the conviction in this case has been upheld, but no sentence has been pronounced. Let me also tell you what the court said today, which I found very interesting. The court said today, and I quote this: "What troubles us is the issue of sentencing. Victim did not see this as a heinous crime. She could not make an informed choice. Society judged her. Legal system failed her. And the family, her own family, abandoned her." These were those strong words by the Supreme Court today. The Supreme Court, in fact, also said that this is an eye-opener case for the rest of the country, and that it should tell us about the loopholes that exist within the legal system. The court also pointed out to the legal and social consequences that took a toll on the girl specifically, because remember that this case came to the Supreme Court through the Calcutta High Court. It was first in the trial court. The trial court convicted this man. It went to the High Court. The High Court acquitted this man, but during the process of hearing, the Calcutta High Court made several derogatory, shameful remarks. In fact, the court said that teenage girls need to control their sexual urges and should not give in to 2 minutes of pleasure, which is why the Supreme Court took suo motu cognizance of this case. Now, the Supreme Court has given its final verdict, where it has upheld the conviction of this man under POCSO, but it has refrained from sentencing using its extraordinary powers. Remember, what really is reflective in this judgment is that POCSO, in the cases of POCSO, judicial discretion is very important, because if you look at the implementation of POCSO, it's been almost more than 13 years that this law has been implemented in the country, and there are two broad areas which have been debated again and again with respect to POCSO. One is the age of consent, with many experts feeling that the age of consent needs to be reduced from the existing 18 years to 16 years, because the society is evolving. Our young adults are also exposed to a lot of things now, and it would be better for consensual relationships to have the age of consent as 16. Now, of course, the government has said a complete no for that. That's what parliament answers have also said. The other thing is, of course, this debate around blanket criminalization of adolescents when it comes to implementation of POCSO Act provisions. Some of these provisions have been misused by families that do not approve of consensual relationships, which is why there could be a 19-year-old boy having a consensual relationship with a 17-year-old girl, but the man gets penalized because sex under POCSO with a minor becomes a rape, which is why judicial discretion becomes all the more important. I think an important thing is also the Supreme Court asking all states to have dedicated special courts in all states to ensure that the trial on POCSO cases is done faster. In fact, there needs to be a strict adherence to timelines. Remember, there is a rule that all rape investigations need to be completed within 2 months in CRPC, but there are certain states like Bihar, Tamil Nadu, UP, Bengal, Odisha, Maharashtra, which do not have that many courts which have a huge pendency of POCSO cases, which is something that the government keeps talking about. In fact, POCSO cases are directly monitored by the Home Ministry as well, using its CCTN system as well, which is why it is taken very seriously. But the court has also, Supreme Court earlier this year also said that sexual harassment cases under POCSO cannot be concluded, cannot be closed just because there has been an understanding between the parties. And that is very important, because it is the bounden duty of courts to decide if the compromise was fair or not. And that courts have again and again repeatedly said that in the case of POCSO, it's important to understand the sexual intent, and that skin to skin contact is not the primary grounds for POCSO cases. In fact, the Supreme Court also overturned an Allahabad High Court judgment recently, which looked at groping a minor, or for that matter, untying the pajamas strings as preparatory stages to rape, and saying that that does not really constitute as rape. The Supreme Court actually cracked down on those kind of statements as well. So the primary purpose of POCSO needs to be protecting our children, but it also doesn't mean that we have to restrict them using laws or restrict their experiences. Remember that POCSO was also brought in because the center ratified the UN Convention on the rights of the child, which is why this child or the young adult has to be at the center of it. His or her development, his or her progress, and his or her welfare needs to be at the center of of the implementation of POCSO Act. Initially, POCSO, the sexual crimes against children were not properly defined. They were inadequately penalized. The conviction rate was very poor, which is why POCSO had to be brought in. In fact, POCSO Act is the only act in this country that for the first time made it had a very clear definition on what sexual assault against children would mean. How would it be defined? It was not abstract. It was not in the ambiguous zone of just saying outraging the modesty of women, as we see in IPC. In fact, it is also gender neutral, which is why we also know that sexual exploitation of male children is not invisibilized. It also makes storage of child porn a crime, which is very important, and that is something that needs to be handled as well. But what happened in the Supreme Court today also shows that judicial discretion when it comes to POCSO is very important, which is why judges have to be sensitive, judiciary has to be sensitive as well when it comes to welfare of our young adults. And more importantly, we need more principled, pragmatic, and very critically more progressive approach to POCSO Act and the implementation of it.